The blood-soaked bandage wound tightly around Willa Cooper's side, did little to quell the searing pain that shot through her body with each labored breath she took. The stagecoach robbery had gone horribly wrong, not that she'd been part of it, but rather an unfortunate passenger caught in the crossfire when outlaws descended upon their journey to Silver Creek, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1878. Willa clutched at her side as she stumbled through the scrubby desert terrain, the relentless midday sun beating down on her sweat-drenched form. The stagecoach driver and other passengers were dead, their bodies left behind at the site of the ambush. She alone had managed to escape in the chaos, crawling away while the bandits were busy looting the coach, but not before one of their stray bullets had found its mark just beneath her ribs. Her vision swam as she staggered forward, the distant silhouette of mountains wavering in the heat. 2 days without proper water in this unforgiving landscape had left her delirious. The makeshift bandage she'd torn from her petticoat was stiff with dried blood, and fresh crimson seeped through with each painful step. Just keep moving, she wheezed to herself. Her once pristine blue traveling dress now tattered and stained with dust and blood. Willa had left Boston with such high hopes. A teaching position awaited her in Silver Creek, a chance to build a new life after losing both parents to influenza last winter. At 23, she had embraced the adventure, ignoring warnings about the dangers of the frontier. Now, as she felt her strength ebbing away with each faltering step, those warnings echoed mockingly in her mind. The ground beneath her feet suddenly seemed to tilt. Willa stumbled, her ankle twisting painfully as she collapsed onto the hard-packed earth. The fall sent fresh agony ripping through her wounded side. She tried to inhale, but her lungs refused to cooperate. The pain was all-consuming now, stealing her breath and clouding her vision with dark spots. This is it, she thought, as a strange sense of calm washed over her. This is how I die. As consciousness began to slip away, the sound of hoofbeats penetrated her haze. A rider approached, the silhouette of man and horse blurring in her failing vision. Strong hands gently turned her over, and through the fog of pain, she made out the concerned face of a man studying her wound. "Miss, can you hear me?" His voice was deep, tinged with worry. She tried to respond, but could only manage a pained gasp. With careful movements, he laid her flat on the ground, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle. "You can't breathe proper all hunched over like that," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Let me help." The stranger's shadow provided blessed relief from the punishing sun as he leaned over her. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe, but first we need to slow this bleeding." Willa felt him press something clean against her wound, the pressure both agonizing and necessary. "My name's Archer Westfield," he said, his voice a lifeline she desperately clung to as darkness threatened to overtake her. "I've got a ranch about 2 miles from here. Can you stay with me until we get there?" She managed a weak nod, fighting to keep her eyes open. "Good girl," he murmured, carefully lifting her. "Just keep breathing, nice and easy." As he settled her in front of him on his horse, Willa's head lolled against the solid warmth of his chest. His heartbeat, strong and steady beneath her ear, became her anchor to consciousness as they rode through the shimmering heat of the Arizona desert. Archer's arms encircled her protectively as he guided his horse forward, one hand holding the reins while the other kept pressure on her wound. Despite the pain clouding her mind, Willa registered the security of his embrace the first time she'd felt safe since the attack. "Stay with me, miss," he urged when her eyes fluttered closed. "What's your name?" "Willa," she managed weakly. "Willa Cooper." "Well, Miss Cooper, you picked a mighty inconvenient spot to get yourself shot," he said, a hint of gentle humor in his tone. "But you're in luck. I've patched up more bullet wounds than I care to count, though usually on cowhands or myself." The rhythmic motion of the horse beneath them sent waves of pain through her side, but Willa fought to remain conscious, focusing on the sound of Archer's voice as he spoke about his ranch, his cattle, anything to keep her mind present. "There it is," he finally said, nodding toward a collection of buildings that had appeared on the horizon. "Westfield Ranch. Not much to look at, but we've got clean water and bandages, and my housekeeper makes a healing tea that tastes like pond water but works wonders." As they approached the modest ranch house, a middle-aged Mexican woman hurried out onto the porch, her eyes widening at the sight of Willa's bloodied form. "Dios mío, what happened?" she called, already turning back to the house. "I will prepare a bed." "Stagecoach robbery from the looks of it," Archer called back. "She's lost a lot of blood, Rosa." The next few minutes passed in a blur for Willa. Gentle hands transferred her from the horse to a bed in a sparsely furnished but clean room. The woman called Rosa cut away the blood-soaked fabric around her wound while Archer brought in hot water and bandages. "The bullet passed through," Rosa murmured, examining the wound. "That is good, but she has lost much blood and the wound needs cleaning." Willa cried out as Rosa began to clean the injury, the pain so intense that black spots danced before her eyes again. "Easy now," Archer's voice came from beside her as he took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "Squeeze as hard as you need." Her fingers clutched his with surprising strength as Rosa continued her ministrations. When the pain became unbearable, Willa turned her face toward Archer, burying it against his arm as tears streamed down her dust-covered cheeks. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't breathe." "You can," he assured her, his free hand moving to stroke her matted hair. "Just follow my breathing, in and out. That's it." For what seemed like hours, they stayed like that, Willa clinging to his hand, while Rosa cleaned and dressed the wound with a poultice of herbs and honey, before wrapping it in clean bandages. By the time they finished, Willa was exhausted but breathing easier, the sharp edge of pain dulled to a persistent throb. "She needs rest and water," Rosa said, wiping her hands on her apron. "And broth when she wakes. The wound is clean, but we must watch for fever." Archer nodded, his eyes still on Willa's pale face. "I'll sit with her. Can you send one of the hands to town for the doctor?" I will send Miguel. He is the fastest rider." After Rosa left, Archer pulled a chair next to the bed and sat, still holding Willa's hand. "You're safe now, Miss Cooper. Rest." Too exhausted to resist, Willa let her eyes close, the gentle pressure of his hand around hers the last thing she registered before sleep claimed her. When she next awoke, the room was dim, lit only by a single oil lamp. Her mouth felt like cotton, and the pain in her side had settled into a dull, persistent ache. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as fresh pain lanced through her. "Easy there," came Archer's voice from beside the bed. He rose from his chair, setting aside a book he'd been reading. "You shouldn't be moving just yet." "Water," she managed to croak. He nodded, pouring from a pitcher on the bedside table. With one hand, he gently lifted her head while the other brought the cup to her lips. The cool water was heaven against her parched throat. "Better?" He asked when she'd had her fill. She nodded, taking her first clear look at her rescuer. In the soft lamplight, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps late 20s or early 30s. His face was tanned and weathered from life outdoors, with lines at the corners of eyes that were a startling shade of blue. Dark blonde hair fell across his forehead, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. "How long have I been asleep?" she asked. "About 6 hours." The doc came and went. "Says Rosa did a fine job cleaning you up, but you'll need to stay put for at least a couple of weeks to let that wound heal proper." Willa's hand moved to her side, feeling the clean bandages beneath the borrowed nightgown someone had dressed her in. The realization brought heat to her cheeks. "Rosa changed your clothes," Archer said, correctly reading her embarrassment. "Your dress was pretty well ruined, I'm afraid." "Thank you," she said softly. "For stopping, for helping me." He shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. "Couldn't very well leave you out there to die, could I?" "Some would have," she replied, thinking of the outlaws who'd shot her without a second thought, his expression sobered. "I'm not some. Now think you can manage some broth. Rosa's been keeping it warm." At her nod, he disappeared, returning moments later with a steaming bowl. Once again, he helped her sit up enough to eat, supporting her with a strong arm around her shoulders while she awkwardly spooned the broth with her free hand. "The stagecoach," she said between sips. "Everyone else." "I sent 2 of my hands to check after the doc told me what happened. They found the coach about 5 miles south, 4 bodies." His voice was gentle but direct. "I'm sorry." Willa closed her eyes, remembering the friendly drummer who'd shared candied almonds with her, the elderly couple returning from visiting their daughter, and Charles, the kind driver who'd pointed out landmarks along their journey. "They didn't deserve that," she whispered. "No," Archer agreed quietly, "they didn't. The men who did it, sheriff's been notified. He and a posse rode out a few hours ago." He took the now empty bowl from her hands. "But you don't need to worry about that now. Your job is to heal." As he helped her lie back down, Willa suddenly felt overwhelmed by it all: the attack, her narrow escape, the kindness of this stranger who'd saved her life. "I was going to be a teacher," she said, her voice catching. "In Silver Creek. They're expecting me." "I'll send word tomorrow," he assured her. "Silver Creek's only about 20 miles from here. When you're well enough, I'll take you there myself." "Thank you," she said again, feeling inadequate in the face of all he'd done. He simply nodded, adjusting the blanket around her. "Try to get some more rest. I'll be right here if you need anything." As Willa drifted back to sleep, she found comfort in his presence, this steady cowboy who'd appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't even known she was making. For 3 days, fever gripped Willa, her body fighting the infection that had set in despite Rosa's careful ministrations. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware sometimes of cool cloths on her forehead, of being helped to drink bitter-tasting teas, of gentle hands changing her bandages. More often than not, when she opened her eyes, it was to find Archer at her bedside, his face drawn with concern. On the 4th morning, she woke clear-headed for the first time, the fever having broken during the night. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, and she could hear the distant sounds of the ranch at workmen calling to each other, the lowing of cattle, the clang of metal on metal from what she guessed was a blacksmith's forge. The door opened, and Rosa entered with a tray. Her weathered face broke into a smile when she saw Willa was awake. "Gracias a Dios," she said, setting the tray down. "The fever has left you. How do you feel, Nina?" "Weak," Willa admitted. "But better." Good, you eat now, build strength." She helped Willa sit up against the pillows and placed the tray across her lap. "Senor Archer, he will be happy. He has worried much." Willa felt a strange flutter in her chest at the mention of Archer's name. "Has he been here the whole time?" Rosa nodded, pouring tea into a cup. "He sleeps in that chair when I cannot make him go to his own bed, only leaves when the ranch cannot wait." She clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "A stubborn man." "He's been very kind," Willa murmured, sipping the tea. "He has good heart, always has since he was a boy." Rosa busied herself tidying the room. "He came west with his father 15 years ago, built this ranch from nothing after the old man died." Willa listened as Rosa spoke of Archer, how he treated his workers fairly, how he'd once rode through a blizzard to fetch the doctor for one of the ranch hands' wives in labor, how he read poetry by lamplight when he thought no one was watching. "He does not like people to know he is soft inside," Rosa said with a wink. "Thinks it makes him look weak. Men." She threw up her hands in mock exasperation. The door opened again, and Archer himself appeared, stopping short when he saw Willa sitting up. "You're awake," he said, a relieved smile spreading across his face. And looking considerably less like death warmed over. "Such flattery," Willa replied dryly, surprising herself with the easy response. He laughed, the sound warming the room. "I see your spirits returning along with your color." Rosa muttered something in Spanish that made Archer's ears turn red before she gathered up some laundry and left the room, shooting him a meaningful glance that Willa couldn't interpret. "The sheriff returned yesterday," Archer said, taking his now familiar seat beside her bed. "They caught 2 of the men who attacked your stagecoach. The others are still at large, but they have good descriptions now." Did they bury the others?" Willa asked quietly. He nodded. "Proper graves in the Silver Creek Cemetery. The sheriff asked if you'd be willing to give a statement once you're well enough." "Of course," she agreed. "I also sent word to the school board about your situation. A Mrs. Abernathy rode out yesterday to see you, but you were still pretty out of it with the fever." He ran a hand through his hair, which looked like he'd been doing that a lot lately. "She seemed mighty relieved you were alive and said to tell you the position will still be waiting whenever you're well enough." Relief flooded through Willa. "Thank you. I was worried they might give it to someone else." "Apparently good teachers are hard to come by out here," Archer said with a small smile. Most young ladies from back east aren't exactly eager to educate a bunch of dusty ranch kids and miners' children. I'm not most young ladies, Willa said, then blushed at how that sounded. I'm beginning to see that, he replied, his eyes lingering on her face a moment longer than necessary before he cleared his throat. Doc says you should be up and about in another week or so, though it'll be a month at least before you're fully healed. I can't impose on your hospitality that long, Willa protested. It's no imposition, he assured her. Besides, where else would you go? Silver Creek's boarding house isn't exactly known for its nursing skills. She had to concede his point. At least let me earn my keep somehow, once I'm stronger. He seemed about to argue but must have recognized the determination in her face. I suppose you could help Rosa with some of the mending. She's always complaining about having to patch my shirts. I'd be happy to, Willa agreed, relieved to have some way to repay his kindness. They fell into a comfortable silence, Willa finishing her breakfast while Archer looked out the window, seemingly lost in thought. She took the opportunity to study him in the daylight. His chambray shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing strong forearms dusted with golden hair. A thin scar ran along his left wrist, disappearing beneath his cuff. He wore no gun that she could see, though she'd noticed a holster hanging by the door when Rosa had opened it earlier. What? He asked, catching her staring. Nothing, she said quickly. I realized I don't know anything about you beyond your name and that you own this ranch. Not much else to know, he said with a shrug. I'm a simple man with simple tastes. Rosa says you read poetry, Willa countered, enjoying the flush that rose to his cheeks. That woman talks too much, he muttered, but there was no heat in it. My mother was a schoolteacher like you're aiming to be. She made sure I appreciated literature before she passed. I'm sorry, Willa said softly, about your mother. It was a long time ago, I was 10. His gaze returned to the window. My father never really got over losing her. That's why we came west after I turned 15. Too many memories back in Pennsylvania. My parents died last winter, Willa offered. Influenza took them both within days of each other. Archer's eyes softened as they returned to her face. It's a hard thing losing family. It is, she agreed. That's partly why I came west too. The house felt empty. Understanding passed between them, a shared experience of loss that needed no further words. After a moment, Archer stood. I should let you rest. I've got a herd to move to the south pasture today. Thank you again, Willa said, for everything. He gave a slight nod, that small smile returning to his lips. Just doing what anyone would do. We both know that's not true, she replied quietly. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or something deeper before he turned to go. At the door, he paused. I'm glad you're feeling better, Miss Cooper. Willa, she corrected. Please call me Willa. Willa, he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name on his tongue. Rest well. After he left, Willa found herself smiling despite the lingering pain in her side. There was something about Archer Westfield that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't since before her parents died. It was dangerous, she knew, to become attached to a man she barely knew, a man whose only connection to her was an act of kindness on a dusty desert road. Yet as she drifted back to sleep, it was his face she saw behind her closed eyelids, and the memory of his gentle hands that followed her into dreams. True to his prediction, a week later Willa was able to get out of bed for short periods. Rosa hovered anxiously the first time she stood, ready to catch her if her legs gave way, but Willa managed to walk slowly to the window and back before exhaustion forced her to return to bed. Each day she grew stronger, extending her walks from the bedroom to the hallway, then to the small parlor, and finally to the front porch where she could sit in a rocking chair and watch the activity of the ranch. The wound in her side was healing cleanly, thanks to Rosa's continued care, though it still pained her if she moved too quickly. Archer was often busy with ranch work, but he made a point to check on her daily, usually joining her for dinner in the evenings. Their conversations came easily, spanning books they'd both read, life in the East versus the West, and the daily happenings around the ranch. He never pressed her about her plans to leave for Silver Creek, and Willa found herself equally reluctant to bring up the subject. On a particularly pleasant evening about 2 weeks after she'd been shot, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. The air was cooler now, a welcome relief from the day's heat. "Rosa says you're healing faster than expected," Archer commented, leaning back in his chair with a cup of coffee balanced on his knee. "She's a miracle worker," Willa agreed. "I never would have survived without her knowledge of herbs and healing." "Or without you finding me," she added after a pause, glancing at him. "Just lucky I was checking fence lines in that area," he said, his standard response whenever she tried to thank him. "Right place, right time." "Still," she persisted, "most men would have done the minimum, taken me to town and left me with the doctor if they stopped at all." He studied her for a long moment. "You have a mighty low opinion of mankind, Willa Cooper." "Not mankind," she clarified. "Just my experiences haven't always shown people at their best." "Tell me," he said simply, his eyes on the darkening horizon. She hesitated, then found herself speaking of things she rarely discussed: her fiancé back in Boston, who had broken their engagement upon learning her parents' modest estate was encumbered by debt. The so-called friends who had disappeared once she was no longer part of their social circle. The relatives who had offered condolences but no actual help when she found herself alone and nearly penniless. "So you see," she concluded, "coming west wasn't just about escaping memories. It was the only path forward that allowed me to keep my dignity." "Their loss," Archer said quietly. "Seems to me a woman willing to travel alone to teach children in a frontier town has more courage and character than the whole lot of them put together." His words warmed her more than they should have. "What about you?" she asked. "No wife waiting patiently while you rescue damsels in distress?" A shadow crossed his face. "No, never married, never found the right woman, or never looked." She immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "It's all right," he said, setting his coffee cup on the small table between them. "I was engaged once, about 5 years back. Caroline was the daughter of a rancher over in the next county." "What happened?" Willa asked softly when he paused. "Apache raid," he said, his voice flat. "Her father's ranch was hit while I was away on a cattle drive. By the time word reached me and I got back." He shook his head. "She was gone, they all were." "Archer, I'm so sorry," Willa whispered, instinctively reaching out to touch his arm. He covered her hand with his own, the contact sending a warmth up her arm that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. "It was a long time ago," he said, echoing what he'd said about his mother. "The army caught up with the renegade band responsible. The local tribes have been peaceful since then. Still," she said, "to lose someone you loved that way." "Life out here is hard," he replied, his thumb absently tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Beautiful but hard." They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky, stars appearing one by one in the vast expanse above them. Willa was acutely aware of his hand still covering hers, of how natural it felt to sit with him like this. "I should probably turn in," she said reluctantly, withdrawing her hand. "Rosa will scold me if I overtire myself." Archer stood, offering his arm for support as she rose from her chair. "Can't have that. She's liable to put me on stew duty again as punishment." "Is your cooking that bad?" Willa asked with a smile as they walked slowly toward the door. "Let's just say the last time I was in charge of dinner, even the dogs wouldn't eat it," he replied with a self-deprecating grin. At her bedroom door, he paused. "The sheriff's coming by tomorrow to take your statement if you're feeling up to it." Willa nodded, sobering at the reminder of how she'd come to be at Westfield Ranch. "Of course. You don't have to see him if you're not ready," Archer added quickly. "I can tell him to come back another day." "No, it's fine," she assured him. "The sooner they catch the rest of those men, the safer everyone will be." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll be there with you if you want." "I'd like that," she admitted. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "Good night, Willa." "Good night, Archer," she replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of how easy it would be to lean forward just slightly. He stepped back, breaking the moment. With a slight nod, he turned and walked down the hallway toward his own room, leaving Willa with a flutter of confusion and longing in her chest that she wasn't quite ready to examine. The sheriff's visit the next day was brief, but difficult, forcing Willa to relive the terrifying moments of the stagecoach robbery. Archer stayed by her side throughout, his steady presence a comfort as she described what she could remember of the attackers. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Cooper," Sheriff Taylor said when she'd finished, tucking his notebook into his vest pocket. "Most folks caught in a situation like that don't walk away." "I wouldn't have if Mr. Westfield hadn't found me," she replied. The sheriff nodded, casting an appraising look at Archer. "Lucky indeed." Something in his tone suggested he might be thinking more than he was saying. "Well, this information will help. We've got 2 of them in custody already, and based on your description, I'm pretty certain they're part of the Harker gang. Been terrorizing stagecoaches between here and Tucson for months now. Will she need to testify if you catch the others?" Archer asked. "Most likely, but that would be in Prescott and not for some time yet." The sheriff stood, settling his hat on his head. "I'll let you know if we make any progress. You take care now, Miss Cooper." After seeing the sheriff out, Archer returned to find Willa pale and drawn, the recounting having taken more out of her than she'd expected. "You should rest," he said gently. She shook her head. "I've been resting for 2 weeks. What I need is fresh air and something to occupy my mind." He considered her for a moment, then offered, "How about a short ride? There's a nice spot by the creek not far from the house, easy terrain." "A ride," she repeated, surprise evident in her voice. "You think I'm well enough, we'll take it slow and I'll be right with you," he assured her. "Doc did say moving around would help your recovery, as long as you don't overdo it." The prospect of leaving the immediate vicinity of the house was temptingly liberating. "I'd like that," she decided, "but I don't have anything suitable to wear for riding." "Rosa's been altering some of my sister's old things for you," Archer said. "She left here years ago to get married, but kept sending her trunks back for storage like this was still her home." A fond smile touched his lips. "I think there's a split riding skirt that might work." An hour later, Willa found herself carefully mounted on a gentle mare named Daisy, wearing the aforementioned riding skirt and a simple blouse that Rosa had indeed altered to fit her slimmer frame. Archer rode beside her on his stallion, keeping their pace slow and steady as they followed a well-worn trail toward the creek. The fresh air and gentle motion were invigorating after being confined for so long. Willa breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the scent of sage and sun-warmed earth. Her side ached dully, but not unbearably so. "You're a natural," Archer observed as she guided Daisy around a rocky patch with ease. "My father kept horses," she explained. "I used to ride every day back in Boston, though never astride like this." "Scandalous," he teased. She laughed, the sound carrying in the clear air. "Thoroughly, my mother would be appalled." "Sometimes the practical way is better than the proper way," he said, "especially out here." They reached the creek a short while later, a ribbon of glittering water cutting through the arid landscape. Cottonwood trees provided welcome shade along its banks, their leaves rustling in the light breeze. Archer dismounted first, then helped Willa down, his hands spanning her waist as he lifted her easily from the saddle. The contact sent that now familiar warmth through her, and she found herself reluctant to step away once her feet touched the ground. If Archer noticed, he gave no sign, simply leading the horses to a grassy spot where they could graze while tethered to a low-hanging branch. From his saddlebag, he produced a small blanket, which he spread in the shade of the largest cottonwood. "Your parlor, madam," he said with an exaggerated bow that made her smile. They sat side by side, looking out at the peaceful scene. A family of ducks paddled by in the creek, the ducklings following obediently in their mother's wake. "It's beautiful here," Willa said softly. "So different from the East, but beautiful in its own way." "That's what my mother used to say about the prairie back home," Archer replied. She'd find beauty in the starkest landscape, said God didn't waste his brush strokes anywhere. "She sounds like a wise woman." She was. He plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between his fingers. "I think she would have liked you." The simple statement touched Willa deeply. "I hope so." They fell silent, listening to the gentle gurgle of the creek and the distant calls of birds. It was peaceful in a way Willa hadn't experienced in a long time, not just the setting, but the companionship, The ease she felt with this man she'd known for such a short time yet trusted implicitly. "I received a letter from Mrs. Abernathy yesterday," she said eventually. "The school board is anxious for me to start as soon as I'm well enough." Archer nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "And how soon do you think that might be?" "Another week, perhaps." She touched her side gingerly. "The pain is lessening every day. I should be able to manage teaching, even if I'm not fully healed." "No need to rush," he said, his eyes on the creek. "Your health comes first." "I've imposed on your hospitality too long already," Willa replied, though the thought of leaving the ranch, of leaving Archer, created an unexpected ache in her chest. "It's not an imposition," he said quietly. "Having you here, it's been nice." The simple admission hung between them, pregnant with unspoken meaning. "It has," she agreed, just as quietly. Archer turned to look at her then, his blue eyes intent. "Willa, whatever he had been about to say was cut short by the sound of approaching riders. Archer was on his feet in an instant, his hand moving to the gun at his hip that Willa hadn't even realized he was wearing. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice suddenly hard as he moved between her and the approaching sounds. 3 riders appeared around a bend in the creek, pulling up short when they spotted Archer. Willa recognized one as Miguel, one of the ranch hands she'd met during her convalescence. "Senor Westfield," Miguel called, urging his horse forward while the other 2 hung back. "We have been looking for you." "What's happened?" Archer demanded, his stance relaxing slightly but his hand remaining near his gun. "Riders coming from the north," Miguel reported. 6 men heavily armed. Thomas recognized one as Jake Harker himself. Willa gasped at the name, her hand flying to her mouth. The leader of the gang that had attacked her stagecoach was coming to Westfield Ranch. Archer's expression darkened. "How far out?" "Maybe an hour, riding slow like they don't want to be noticed," Miguel replied. "Thomas is watching them from the ridge." Archer turned to Willa, his face grim. "We need to get back to the ranch. Now." The ride back was far faster than their leisurely journey out, though Archer still kept a watchful eye on Willa, making sure the pace wasn't too much for her healing wound. His mind was racing. If Jake Harker was indeed heading for his ranch, it could only mean one thing: they'd somehow learned Willa was there. How could they know? Willa asked when he voiced this theory as they neared the ranch house. "No one knew except the sheriff and your people." "Word travels fast," Archer replied grimly. "All it would take is one loose tongue in town, or maybe they've been watching the place since they lost your trail." Rosa was waiting anxiously on the porch as they rode in. "Miguel told me," she said as Archer helped Willa dismount. "I have prepared the back room as you always instructed." Archer nodded. "Good, get everything ready, then take Willa there and stay with her." "Wait," Willa protested as he handed Daisy's reins to one of the waiting ranch hands. "What are you going to do?" His jaw was set in a determined line. "What needs to be done? These men killed innocent people, Willa. They shot you and left you to die. I'm not letting them harm anyone else." "But there are 6 of them," she argued, fear gripping her heart. "Even with your men, those aren't good odds." "We've faced worse," he said, his voice softening as he looked at her. "Go with Rosa. Stay in the safe room until I come for you." Archer, he cupped her face with one hand, his touch unexpectedly gentle given the tension of the moment. "Please, Willa." "I can't protect you and fight them at the same time." The fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her, decided her. She nodded reluctantly. "Be careful," she whispered. "Always am," he replied with a ghost of his usual smile before turning to issue orders to the gathered ranch hands. Rosa led Willa into the house and through the kitchen to what appeared to be a pantry. Pushing aside several shelves revealed a hidden door that opened into a small, windowless room equipped with a narrow bed, some supplies, and Willa noted with surprise a loaded shotgun mounted on the wall. "Senor Archer had this built after what happened to his Caroline," Rosa explained as she lit a lamp. "A safe place if there is trouble." Willa sat on the edge of the bed, her side aching from the rushed ride. "Has it been needed often?" "Only once before, when cattle rustlers came 2 winters ago," the older woman replied, settling beside her. "The ranch is usually peaceful." "Until I brought trouble to your door," Willa said bitterly. Rosa patted her hand. "This is not your doing, Nina. Bad men make their own choices." They sat in tense silence after that, straining to hear what might be happening outside. Willa found herself holding her breath at every distant sound, her imagination conjuring images of Archer facing down 6 armed killers. "He is a good man," Rosa said suddenly. "The best I know." "Yes," Willa agreed softly. "He is. And he looks at you the way my Pablo looked at me when we were young," the older woman continued, a knowing gleam in her eye despite the gravity of their situation. Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm sure you're mistaken." "He's just been kind because I was injured." Rosa made a dismissive sound. "I have known Archer Westfield since he was 17 years old. Never has he sat by a woman sick for days. Never has he looked at anyone the way he looks at you." She leaned closer, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "Not even his Caroline." Before Willa could formulate a response, the unmistakable sound of gunshots shattered the quiet, making both women jump. More shots followed, then shouting, though the thick walls muffled the words. Willa stood, instinctively moving toward the door, but Rosa caught her arm. "You must stay," she insisted. "You promised." "But they could be hurt. Archer could be—" She couldn't complete the thought. "The men know what to do," Rosa assured her, though her own face was tight with worry. "We can only wait and pray." The next 30 minutes were the longest of Willa's life. The gunfire eventually ceased, but the silence that followed was almost worse. Every creak, every distant sound had her tensing, imagining the worst. When a sharp knock finally came at the hidden door, both women jumped. "Rosa, Willa." "It's me," Archer's voice called. Rosa quickly moved to open the door, revealing Archer standing there, his shirt torn and a smear of blood on his cheek, but otherwise unharmed. Willa nearly collapsed with relief. "It's over," he said, his eyes finding hers. "We got them, all of them." "Is anyone hurt?" Rosa demanded. Pete took a bullet to the arm, but Doc, seeing to him, "Everyone else is fine." His gaze remained fixed on Willa. "They won't hurt anyone again, are they?" Willa couldn't bring herself to ask directly. "Two dead," Archer replied grimly. "The rest, including Harker, are tied up waiting for the sheriff. He's on his way." Rosa muttered something that sounded like a prayer before bustling past him. "I will see to Pete and prepare food. You all must be hungry." After she left, Archer stepped into the small room, closing the distance between himself and Willa in 2 strides. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "I was so worried," she whispered, her arms encircling his waist, feeling the solid reality of him alive and whole. "I told you I'd be careful," he murmured against her hair. They stood like that for a long moment, neither willing to let go. When Archer finally pulled back slightly, his eyes were dark with an emotion Willa was afraid to name. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough. "When I saw Harker coming toward the house, all I could think about was you. Not the ranch, not my men, just you." His hands came up to frame her face. "I can't remember the last time I was that scared." "Archer," she breathed, her heart pounding. "I know it hasn't been long," he continued, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "I know you have plans, a position waiting in Silver Creek. But I need you to know that these past weeks, having you here, it's like the ranch finally became a home again." Willa's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want you to go," he admitted, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm saying that somehow, in the middle of all this madness, I've fallen in love with you, Willa Cooper." The world seemed to still around them. For a breathless moment, Willa couldn't speak, could only stare up at this man who'd saved her life in more ways than one. "I know it's too soon," he said quickly, misinterpreting her silence. "I know you barely know me, and you have every right to." She cut him off by rising on tiptoe and pressing her lips to his. He froze for a split second before responding, his arms tightening around her as he deepened the kiss. It was gentle yet urgent, tender yet passionate, and Willa felt it down to her toes. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, she smiled up at him. "I don't want to go either," she admitted. "Every day I've been getting stronger, I've been dreading having to leave." Hope lit his eyes. "Really, really," she confirmed. "I've spent my whole life doing what was expected, being proper and sensible. Then I came west seeking adventure and nearly died my first week here." She shook her head with a small laugh. "But finding you, that makes it all worthwhile." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Archer asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. I'm saying I love you too, Willa replied simply. I think I have since you laid me down and told me to breathe when all I could feel was pain. You became my breath, Archer, my lifeline. He kissed her again, more deeply this time, pouring all his emotion into the connection between them. Willa responded in kind, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, heedless of the dried blood on his cheek or the lingering ache in her side. The sound of voices outside the room eventually drew them apart. Archer pressed his forehead to hers with a sigh. The sheriff will be here soon, he said reluctantly, and I should check on Pete. Of course, she agreed, though she made no move to release him. He chuckled, pressing a quick kiss to the tip of her nose. Tonight, he promised. Once this is all settled, we'll talk more. Tonight, she echoed, finally letting her arms drop. Hand in hand, they emerged from the safe room to face whatever came next together. The aftermath of the gunfight kept the ranch in turmoil for hours. Sheriff Taylor arrived with several deputies to take custody of the prisoners, including Jake Harker, who glared murderously at Willa when she formally identified him. The bodies of the two dead outlaws were loaded onto a wagon for transport back to town. Through it all, Archer stayed close to Willa's side, his hand often finding hers or resting protectively at the small of her back. These small touches grounded her, helping her stay calm as she gave her statement to the sheriff once again. You'll need to come to Prescott for the trial, Sheriff Taylor told her. Probably in a month or so. I'll send word when the date's set. Willa nodded, glancing at Archer. We'll be there. The casual "we" wasn't lost on the sheriff, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing, merely tipping his hat as he prepared to leave with his prisoners. As the wagons and riders disappeared down the road, Willa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The men who had attacked her stagecoach, who had killed innocent people and left her for dead, would face justice. It wouldn't bring back those who were lost, but it offered a kind of closure she hadn't realized she needed. You all right? Archer asked quietly, coming to stand beside her on the porch as the dust settled behind the departing procession. Yes, she said and meant it. It feels like I can finally move forward now, he nodded, understanding in his eyes. Speaking of moving forward. We should talk about what happens next. Willa took a deep breath. Yes, we should. They walked together to the small garden behind the house, a sheltered spot Rosa had cultivated with flowers and herbs that somehow thrived despite the harsh desert climate. A bench sat beneath a flowering mesquite tree, offering privacy from the busy main yard where the ranch hands were still clearing up after the day's events. I meant what I said before, Archer began once they were seated. I love you, Willa. It happened faster than I ever expected, but I'm certain of it. I love you too, she replied, the words still new but feeling right on her tongue. But you have commitments, he finished for her. The teaching position, she nodded. I gave my word. They've been without a teacher for months. Archer took her hand, running his thumb across her knuckles thoughtfully. What if there was a way you could keep your promise and we could still be together? What do you mean? Silver Creek is only 20 miles from here, he pointed out. A lot of my hands make the ride to town and back in a single day. Willa's heart quickened as she began to understand what he was suggesting. You think I could teach there but live? Here, it would mean an early start each day, he acknowledged, and a daily ride. But I could take you myself, at least until your side is completely healed. And in winter, when the weather's bad, we could find you lodgings in town for those times, he said. Or, he hesitated, a flush creeping up his neck, or by then, maybe you wouldn't be Miss Cooper anymore. Her breath caught. Archer Westfield, are you proposing to me? Not very well, apparently, he said with a self-deprecating smile before sliding off the bench to one knee before her. Willa Cooper, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're brave and kind and stronger than you know. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Tears pricked at Willa's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Joy transformed his face as he rose, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. Their kiss was sweet with promise, a seal on the future they would build together. There's something else, he said when they finally parted. Something I've been thinking about since you first told me about your teaching aspirations. What is it? There are at least a dozen children within riding distance of this ranch who can't attend school in Silver Creek because it's too far, he explained. Ranch kids, mostly. I've spoken with some of their parents over the years about pooling resources to hire a teacher, but it never came to anything. Understanding dawned on Willa's face. You think I could teach them here, he nodded. Not right away, of course. You should fulfill your commitment to the Silver Creek School first, but perhaps next year. His eyes were alight with possibility. We could convert one of the outbuildings. Make a proper schoolhouse right here on the ranch. The idea took root in Willa's heart immediately. It would be wonderful, she agreed, a way to serve the community and be home with. She trailed off, blushing slightly. With your husband, Archer supplied, his smile tender. And maybe someday our children? Yes, she said softly, our children. He kissed her again, sealing this new dream between them. The weeks that followed were busy ones. Willa continued to heal, growing stronger each day until she was able to ride comfortably to Silver Creek with Archer to meet with the school board. Mrs. Abernathy was delighted to see her recovered and eager to have her start teaching as soon as possible. When Willa explained her circumstances, her engagement to Archer, and her plan to commute daily from his ranch, the older woman had smiled knowingly. I had a feeling something of the sort might happen, she said with a wink. Mr. Westfield was mighty concerned about you during your recovery. The other board members were amenable to the arrangement as well, particularly when Archer mentioned his long-term plan for a school at the ranch that could serve the outlying families. The board chairman even suggested that such a school could become an official satellite of the Silver Creek School, with Willa potentially overseeing both eventually. They set a wedding date for the last Saturday in August, giving them just over a month to prepare. It would be a small ceremony at the ranch, with Rosa fussing over every detail despite Willa's assurances that she wanted something simple. A bride should have a proper wedding, Rosa insisted, already planning the menu and enlisting the ranch hands' wives to help sew a wedding dress. Even in the middle of nowhere, Willa gave in gracefully, touched by the older woman's enthusiasm. In truth, she was grateful for Rosa's guidance, having no mother or sisters to help her prepare for this milestone. As the wedding day approached, Willa found herself increasingly drawn into the life of the ranch. She learned the names and faces of all the hands and their families, helped Rosa with the cooking and mending, and even began riding out with Archer occasionally to check on the cattle or inspect fence lines. You're a natural ranch wife, he told her one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, her head resting comfortably against his shoulder. I never would have imagined it, she admitted. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I'd be preparing to marry a rancher in Arizona territory, I'd have thought they were mad. Having second thoughts, he asked, only half joking. She turned to look at him, her hand coming up to touch his cheek. Not for a single moment. This feels right, Archer, like I've found where I was always meant to be. The day before their wedding, Willa rode with Archer to Prescott for the trial of Jake Harker and his remaining gang members. It was a difficult day, revisiting the trauma of the stagecoach robbery, but Archer's steady presence beside her made it bearable. The evidence against the outlaws was overwhelming, with Willa's testimony being only one piece of a larger case involving multiple robberies and murders across the territory. By nightfall, the jury had returned with guilty verdicts for all 4 men. Jake Harker was sentenced to hang while his accomplices received lengthy prison terms. It's over, Archer said as they rode away from the courthouse. Really over this time, Willa nodded, feeling a complex mixture of relief, sadness for the lives lost, and gratitude for her own survival. I keep thinking about the others on the stagecoach. They deserved justice too. They got it today, Archer replied gently, and you helped make that happen. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the setting sun painting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. When they stopped to rest the horses at a stream, Archer produced a small package from his saddlebag. I was going to wait until tomorrow, he said, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. But this seems like the right moment. Willa unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Opening it, she found a tiny painted miniature of Archer on one side. The other side was empty. "For you," he explained, watching her face. "I thought, maybe someday we could put a picture of our family in the other side." Tears welled in Willa's eyes as she closed the locket and pressed it to her heart. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Will you put it on me?" He nodded, moving behind her to fasten the chain around her neck. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin at her nape, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. When he finished, his hands remained on her shoulders, turning her gently to face him. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "you become my wife." "Tomorrow," she echoed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright. The August heat, tempered by a gentle breeze that set the bunting Rosa had hung around the ranch, fluttering festively. The ceremony would take place beneath the cottonwood trees by the creek, where Archer and Willa had first begun to acknowledge their feelings for each other. Rosa and the other women had transformed the spot, with flowers gathered from the desert and ribbons brought from town. Benches had been arranged in rows, and an arch of twisted branches marked where the couple would stand. In the ranch house, Willa prepared with Rosa's help, donning the simple but elegant white dress the women had created for her. Her hair was arranged in a crown of braids interwoven with tiny wildflowers, and the gold locket Archer had given her rested at the base of her throat. "You are beautiful, Nina," Rosa declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Like an angel." Willa smiled, touched by the older woman's sentiment. "Thank you, Rosa, for everything. You've become like family to me these past weeks." "I am family now," Rosa corrected, patting her cheek affectionately, "or I will be in an hour's time." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Miguel, who would escort Willa to the ceremony in place of her father. The ranch hand looked unusually smart in his Sunday best, his usually unruly hair slicked down with water. "Señorita Cooper," he said with a formal bow, "it is time." Taking a deep breath, Willa took his offered arm, her heart fluttering with anticipation rather than nerves. This was right. This was where she belonged. The walk to the creek was like something from a dream. Willa was vaguely aware of the gathered guests' ranch hands and their families, townspeople from Silver Creek, even Sheriff Taylor and his wife, but her focus was entirely on the man waiting for her beneath the arch. Archer stood tall and proud, more handsome than she'd ever seen him in a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaven. But it was his eyes that captured her blue as the Arizona sky and filled with such love that it took her breath away. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. They had written their own vows, simple declarations of love and commitment that moved many in the audience to tears. When the circuit-riding preacher finally pronounced them husband and wife, Archer's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing under the stars. Archer barely left Willa's side, his arm around her waist or his hand holding hers as they received congratulations from their guests. "Mrs. Westfield," he murmured in her ear as they swayed together to a slow fiddle tune. "How does it sound?" "Like music," she replied, smiling up at him. "Like home." Later, when the guests had departed and the ranch had quieted for the night, Archer carried his bride across the threshold of their home, no longer just his, but theirs. He'd had the master bedroom freshly painted and furnished with a new bed and dressing table as a wedding gift. "Welcome home," he said softly as he set her down. Willa looked around at the room, at the man before her, at the new life stretching out before them. "I am home," she replied, "wherever you are." His kiss then was different from those they'd shared before, deeper, more urgent, full of promise and desire too long restrained. Willa responded in kind, her hands sliding beneath his jacket to feel the warmth of him through his shirt. "I love you, Willa Westfield," Archer whispered against her lips. "And I love you," she replied, drawing him toward their marriage bed. "Always." The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Willa taught at the Silver Creek School for that first year, riding back and forth each day as planned. The following autumn, they opened the Westfield Ranch School with 8 students from neighboring ranches, a number that grew steadily as word spread. Their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Willa's mother, arrived just before their second anniversary, a tiny, perfect being with Archer's blue eyes and Willa's determined spirit. A son, Michael, followed 2 years later, and eventually another daughter, Sarah. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Archer's cattle business expanded, while Willa introduced new ideas: a kitchen garden that grew into a small orchard, beehives that produced honey sold as far away as Tucson, and eventually a lending library for the ranch families who couldn't make regular trips to town. There were hard times, 2 droughts that stressed the cattle and their finances, a winter so harsh they lost part of the herd, the year Michael fell ill with scarlet fever and they feared they might lose him. But through it all, they faced each challenge together, their love deepening with each passing season. On the evening of their 10th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching their children play in the yard with the dogs. Archer's arm was around Willa's shoulders, her head resting comfortably against him. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. "When I found you in the desert." "Often," she admitted, her hand coming up to touch the locket she still wore daily. Inside now were tiny portraits of their 3 children. "How close I came to never knowing this life, never knowing you. I still can't believe how lucky I was," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That I decided to check that particular stretch of fence line on that particular day." Willa smiled, turning to look at the man who had saved her in more ways than one, the man who had become her partner, her lover, her best friend. "It wasn't luck," she said softly. "It was destiny." Archer's answering smile was as warm and true as it had been on their wedding day. "I like that better," he agreed. Destiny. As the sun set over the land they'd built their life on, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they shared a kiss that held a decade of memories and the promise of many more to come. From that first desperate moment when she couldn't breathe through her pain, and he had laid her down with a gentle, "Let me help," their story had unfolded exactly as it was meant to: a love born in the wild, untamed beauty of the West, stronger than hardship, deeper than pain, and more enduring than either of them could have imagined.